Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and today we're looking at Koikoi Japan Hanafuda playing cards. Now this is a copyright 2015 game, and that's as much research as I've done. The backstory here is a couple hundred years ago in Japan, there was this little company called Nintendo that made Hanafuda playing cards. The Yakuza preferred and decided to prefer buying their Hanafuda playing cards from Nintendo, which led for Nintendo to then become a very successful, very well established financially, at least, company for the next couple hundred years. At some point, they eventually got to the point where they were making toys, and then some bowling alleys, and then some shooting galleries using light guns in bowling alleys, I believe, at one point. And then they eventually made an arcade game called Donkey Kong. Then they eventually made a Nintendo Entertainment System and a Famicom, as it was called in Japan, which there's slight differences in the Famicom and the Nintendo Entertainment System. And then that began their current generation of success in making video game consoles and video games in general. I've always wanted to play Hanafuda card games, like the game built around Hanafuda, but there's been considerably few games out there in English that would even begin to teach you how to play. Luckily, Nintendo themselves put out a collection of board games and simple games, and they included Hanafuda. So with that, I was able to watch someone else play them and realize that it's actually amazingly simple from the looks of it to play Hanafuda. Although I don't know if the game is actually called Hanafuda or if just the cards are called Hanafuda. I imagine both are. Japanese is a pretty subtle language, so I would imagine you would use the close to the same word or phrase for both. If anything, it seems like there's a genius design in Hanafuda, in that it is a game designed for completely illiterate people. There's no words, it seems, and there's no numbers, and we'll go through the tutorial to explain that a little bit more. And there definitely are things that I won't know. So it'll be kind of hard as a video game critic to criticize this specific game. I'm more focused here on actually just trying to learn the insides and outs of the game and the phrases. This is effectively the equivalent of trying to learn how to play actual 4-player Mahjong versus the very, very prevalent solitaire version of Mahjong, where you just use the Mahjong tiles to match the two shapes and pieces. That is very much not what the 4-player Mahjong is. The 4-player Mahjong is much more like, I think, Gin Rummy would be the closest equivalent. It's fairly similar to that, and it makes a lot of sense why you would use Mahjong tiles in more humid, rainy areas like Japan instead of paper, where paper requires to have trees and is fairly expensive. Paper, even in the West, was fairly expensive until, I would say, the last couple hundred years. So yeah, that's, I think, all the setup we really need to know. Koikoi is one of the things you say to double the score. Interesting, you have a tutorial and a help here. Let's start with the options. So I've got the audio down. Like many games, the audio is just really, really loud, even when I have it externally turned down to 10%. Although a lot of that is just my setup too. Here you have it defaulted, at least when I installed it from Steam, which Steam probably knows my default language is English, so it defaulted to English. I wouldn't be surprised if there's just a general localization file setting. But you could turn it to Japanese, or you could oddly turn it to Dutch. So I imagine the Dutch at some point picked up Hanafuda. That would make some sense. You can adjust the speed. It started in a window. You can set it to full screen. Here you have 4 levels of difficulty. I imagine that's what that means when it says calm level, as in computer level. And then game rounds by default or at 12. I brought it down to 6. So let's look at the help part. How to play Koikoi. Koikoi is a variation of Hanafuda involving 2 players. So there are different ones. The object of the game is to earn points by forming Yaku, or card combinations. The cards, I think, are worth mentioning that there are 4 tiers of cards, and there are 12 types of cards, suits of cards. One suit represents one of the 12 months in, I guess, the Gregorian calendar, which I guess was the same calendar that was being used in Japan at the time too. So what you'll have is a picture of a card on a picture of, say, spring, and there will be 4 tiers of that same picture. Each tier will have more details, and thus the one with the most details is the highest level and tier of cards. So they'll probably explain that. So Yaku is combinations. From cards accumulated in your point pile, cards can be added to the point pile if a month card in your hand matches a month card in the center. So there will be a layout, I believe, of 12 or 16, we'll see in a second, cards in the middle that the 2 players will play off of. And then there will be a draw pile whenever a player takes a card from the center pile. They may be able to draw directly from the draw pile also. Decide the Oya, quote, dealer. Before starting, choose the Oya or the dealer. Players choose a face down card from the pile, and the player with their earliest month, starting with January, is the Oya. The opponent is called the Ko. Which, yeah, I think Ko is the basic Japanese word for opponent. Play order. Each player starts with 8 cards, and 8 cards are placed in the center. I was wrong, not 12, 8. Each player's cards are placed face down so the other player cannot see them. The Oya goes first to start the match. Like, honestly, this game probably could be localized fairly easily if they didn't throw in any of the Japanese terms. Although, I think people that would want to play Hanafuda probably would want that Japanese element to it, and it's that tradition. Japanophiles basically would want to play this, whereas everyone else wouldn't have heard of it, or there very possibly is a cheap ripoff of this game out there. And of the thousands and thousands of card games you play with a standard deck of cards with the kings, queens, jacks, and the 4 suits, there's probably something similar to that. It would be fairly easy to kind of do the same thing with a standard deck. You would just then have to have the ace represent January, and the ace of heart represent the lowest tier of January, and then the ace of diamonds the next lowest, and then the ace of spades, and then the ace of clubs, or however you would order it. But then you wouldn't have the nice pictures, and that really is the one thing about Hanafuda that is better than a standard deck, or a Western deck, let's call it, is that while you can get some decently looking Western card decks, they're never really great. They're pretty generic, they're pretty simple. They're there to be tokens for a wide variety of games, so they're not very specialized. When you compare them to like tarot cards, which are only used for doing tarot readings and playing around with that, the art style is sorely missing. Or if you compare it to Hanafuda cards, once we see them, you'll see the art style is sorely missing. Like the most interesting, I imagine, Western card decks you can find are just very custom ones, like the ones with Playboy bunnies on them or something like that. And that's about it. Let's see. Where did we stop? Each player's cards are placed face down so the other can't see it. The oil goes first to start the match. We had already read that. So the play order. Number 1, placing a card from your hand. Select one card from your hand, place it down. If there's a card of the same month in the center, you may collect it along with the card you place down. If there are 2 cards of the same month, you may select one and collect it along with the card you place down. So it seems like it's saying here, and again, these instructions probably are just very roughly translated from Japanese. If there's a card that's the same month as what you've placed down, you can collect the one in the center. If there are 2 cards of the same month, you may select still only one and collect it along with the one. But if there are 3 of the same month, then you may collect all 3 with the card you place down, which that's an interesting situation because that probably doesn't happen very often. If there are no matching cards, the placed card down is added to the center cards. So that might explain why I saw more cards in the center than 8. Play order. Step 2, drawing from a pile. Draw a card from the draw pile. So then you draw. If there's a card of the same month in the center, you may collect it along with the drawn card. And as explained in step 1, if there are 2 cards of the same month, you may select one and collect it. If there are 3 cards of the same month, you may collect all 3 with the drawn card. So the rules haven't changed between putting one down versus drawing one. Now, what I am confused here is, do we do both of those things? Do we do step 1 here, then step 2? Or is it, do we do step 1 or step 2? If there are no matching cards, it's drawn and added to the center tile. Okay. So, step 3 is, I think this is option 3. I think you get to do some of these things, but not all of them. Let's see. So, step 3 is koikoi, which apparently means come on. Okay. You know what? I think I've seen enough anime and Japanese language shows to the point where I think I've heard the phrase koikoi said. Although it's probably more pronounced koikoi in kind of an angry form, not in kind of a happy koikoi frame, and my pronunciation is probably terrible in both of those. And if you formed a Yaku, well, there's the Yakuza there. You have the root of it there. If you formed a Yaku, what was a Yaku? Forming a Yaku was when you make a combination. So, we have to go back. If you formed a combination in Yaku, they really should have everything in parentheses every single time. Or can add points to an already formed Yaku. You can call out koikoi or select stop. If you choose koikoi, the match continues. Let's see. Otherwise, the match just ends there. So, by the sense of it, seems like if you say Koikoi, your opponent at that point has to say, well, let's keep playing, or let's just end this match now and count up the points. So either person on their turn can just say, let's end this now, which is kind of a simplistic and odd strategy mechanic, because it feels like you could get a really high score of like all 4 of a month card in one move and then say let's stop, and then the other person might have to play well, you would say Koikoi, and then they probably wouldn't say stop then, and then they would play, and if let's say your opponent didn't score it all in that turn and then you matched another 4, you might be 8 points ahead or higher in 2 turns, and at some point your opponent is going to have to cut their losses and say let's stop, instead of just trying to catch up. But it's not an unfair strategy concept, it's just a weird strategy concept. Whereas in most games it would be first one to like 10 points wins, or some hard ending there. Here it doesn't seem like there's much of a hard ending, maybe once you run out of cards. Let's continue reading. If you choose Koikoi, the match continues. If you have no remaining cards left after forming your Yaku, then the game is automatically stopped. So if you play all of the cards out of your hand and basically play everything in your hand, then you automatically end the match. And so there's where more of the strategy would integrate into this, is that your goal is obviously to get as many points while as quickly as possible spending all of your cards in your hand. The match continues when players taking turn and carrying out steps 1 through 3. I guess you do all 3, or you can do all 3. Number 4 is stop. If a player forms a Yaku and does not call Koikoi, then a stop occurs and the first round is over. The player who called the stop receives points from their opponents corresponding to their Yaku also, and the stopping player becomes the dealer, the Oya, of the next round. Again, interesting way to play, because you're basically saying let's continue playing after every round. Let's see, if a player forms a Yaku and does not call Koikoi, then a stop occurs and the first round is over. Does something happen in the later rounds? If neither player is able to call stop before the cards in the hands are discarded, the round ends in a stalemate. When this happens, the Ko gives 1 point to the Oya, so the opponent gives 1 point to the dealer, and the next round begins, and the dealer does not change. This is probably one of these mechanics that they have in casinos where you get a cut if you're the dealer, and you have a slightly higher chance of succeeding if you're the dealer. Although I wouldn't be surprised if in a game like this, and many like underground Yakuza gambling facilities, they just take a cut of the winnings always. So if 2 civilians go to underground casino and they play and gamble their own money, when they go to cash out their chips, I wouldn't be surprised if the Yakuza takes a heavy cut, 50%, maybe even higher. Maybe they're a little bit nicer about it. Maybe it's only like 10%. Who would know? Unless you've actually been in one. The final winner, once the decided number of rounds has been completed, the player with the most points wins. However, if one player runs out of points before the number of rounds have been reached, that player with no remaining points loses. So do you start with any points, or does everybody start at 0? Because then in that first round, there is definitely a chance that if you got a stalemate in the first round and you are the opponent, the koi, and you have to give 1 point to the dealer because of that stalemate, you may lose in that first round completely if you did not get any Yaku, any combinations. This is clearly the boring part of all of this, though. Reading and just trying to learn it. And this is kind of the problem with trying to learn any new game. Digitally is a lot better than in the real world, and you definitely digitally don't have the problem of someone trying to teach you a new game and either them not really knowing the rules or them straight up just telling you the wrong rules or telling you the house rules. There's been many a time where I've had people play Monopoly or other board games or card games and just make up the rules, not know that the rules they're playing by is some family house rules that nobody else plays by. Controls wise, we really don't need to know too much. Left click confirms the selected card, executes a selected button, and advances the next screen. We've been doing that this whole time. And then here we have some credits from some sound files. Okay, so then what's the tutorial do? Interesting. Interesting to have a tutorial and a help file that just explained everything. Hi there, my name is Meg. You don't really look like a Meg, but okay. This has been localized oddly. Unless you're going to just say that this is a cosplaying Westerner that goes by the name Meg, or she's half Japanese and she was named a Western name. I'll be your guide through this tutorial. Let's play Koikoi together and I'll teach you the basic rules. By the time you finish this tutorial, you should be able to play Koikoi all by yourself. And here we have a slightly different smiling face animation, but the rest of the body is not moving at all. I'm not expecting too much from this game. I mean, this really is niche. This is a very cult niche game. And it really does certainly explain why I've been looking for a game like this and you can't really find it. There's a few kinds of games on Steam that you just don't have a lot of. One is just a standard Klondike solitaire, particularly for free, or even a free cell solitaire. But there are oddly hundreds of solitaire games where you just match the cards on top of each other, which are made using a engine that's like free to use. Another one that's extremely rare is, of course, Hanafuda. There is definitely one other kind of game. Sudoku games, kind of hard to find those too. There are definitely some card games like cribbage that are kind of missing. Now there is Tabletop Simulator that exists, and in a lot of ways buying Tabletop Simulator might be your best choice to play almost any card game. There also are instances where you have things like Hasbro games that are like Cluedo, that there are 1 or 2 versions of those games made by Hasbro on Steam, but they suck and they're way expensive. So yeah, there's definitely a lot more room for a few more good versions of some of these games. First, let me explain about Koikoi. Koikoi is a variation of Hanafuda involving 2 players, so there must be a single solitaire way to play Hanafuda. I have no idea how you would do that, though. Yeah, I guess you could try some form of something like Klondike Solitaire with it, but you'd have to really work hard to do that. And I would say if you have a Nintendo Switch, get the Nintendo, I believe it's called Gamehouse 51 is the name of the game, but this Nintendo made collection of mini games, most of which are not Japanese, is definitely a good offering. because if you have a Switch and you tend to be out and about, or if you have kids that tend to be out and about, it will teach them how to play a lot of more standard board games and keep them more interested. Let's see. Back to this. The goal is to form a Yaku combination with your cards and earn points. We already know that. Points are taken from each other, and at the end of the round, the player with the most points win. Interesting. So when you make a Yaku, you're taking those points from your opponent, apparently. That's interesting. And see, this is the part where the help file really dropped the ball. These are Hanafuda games used, cards used in the game. So, I was not exaggerating. They are literally designed for literate people. There's no numbers here. There's no words. And it's not some complicated system like the Mahjong tiles where the one swan here makes this like the one of swans, or the 7 flowers here makes this the 7 of flowers, or the large amount of leaves here makes this the large amount of this, or this was probably a boar. This is probably, but this isn't the one of swans, and this isn't the one of boars, and this isn't the one of birds or cranes. It's not like that at all. There are a total of 48 cards with 4 cards in each type of tree or flower representing the 12 months of the year. All cards are used when playing Koikoi. So they call a group of the 4 tiers in 1 month a tree or flower. Again, remember this is translated from Japanese, so it probably is very artsy and makes a lot of sense in Japanese. Since ancient times in Japan, the months of the year have been represented by these trees and flowers. And inherently, this is why Hanafuda would make a lot more sense to Japanese people compared to anyone else. Also, there are cards depicting animals, ribbons, and the moon, along with flowers. Okay, that's enough for the explanation. Really? I would be fairly happy if they just showed me all 48 cards right now and explained it. Let's go ahead and start playing Koikoi. And we're going to play a full game. Alright. First, let's decide who will be the Oya, or the dealer. It's probably Oya. So, typically, what you would use 2 letters to pronounce one sound in Japanese. So the OY probably is closer to oi, and then the A is probably elongated to ah. So it's probably oya or something close to that, if I was to guess. But then on occasion you will have things that are like Su, TSU, is pronounced as those 3 letters in English writing, or is pronounced as one sound. I'm gonna stick with the Oya. The Oya gets to go first and has an advantage in forming Yaku. First, select any card you like. They pulled in my logo from Steam. Interesting. This kind of Steam integration didn't really matter. So we're just going to pick one card, and whichever one is closest to January in the months, which we don't know which card means what still, so we're in trouble. I imagine in this tutorial they're probably going to give us something like January. Like, let's see. You drew the March card. See, this was pre-programmed, I imagine. Your opponent drew the September card. Okay. Now the good news, I think, is you can play this without actually knowing the months, because it's only in this first deciding point that you need to know which card is closer to January versus which isn't. After this point, you can kind of ignore or just be ignorant, which I definitely will be ignorant of what the actual month is, because the art is all you have to really match. Each card represents a month, and one with the earliest month is the Oya. Also, it seems like you start with 30 points instead of 0, which that changes things. This time you chose the earlier month, so you will be the Oya. Your opponent is called the Ko. So this is the main part of the game. Now we'll shuffle the face down cards and place 8 of them face up in the center. Then we'll give each player 8 cards to put in their hand. The remaining cards will go in the draw pile. Now we'll start round 1. Beginning with the Oya, each player will take turns placing a card in the center. If there's a card of the same month, collect it with your own and place it in their point pile to start forming Yaku. Although you can stop as soon as you form a Yaku, you can also call out Koikoi come on in order to try to earn more points by forming new Yaku or strengthening existing ones. This is the most exciting part of playing Koikoi. I'll explain more about calling Koikoi later, but first let's have you place one of your cards in the center and try to find a match. In the center here, there's a June card called Peony and Butterfly, peony being a flower, with a peony drawn on it. If you have a card in your hand with the same flower drawn on it, select that card and place it down in the center. Okay. So we have peony and ribbon. You put it down. The cards match, so you earned a card. And the game may help you throughout all of this. As you see, cards of the same month have the same type of flowers on them, so you're matching the flowers. By matching cards of the same month, you can collect them for your own. Let's see. But be careful, because there are some cards that are the same month but look very different. Which apparently this is the same month, and really the art style in this form is about the only thing that's the same for this compared to the others. Because you have here a gray leaf and ribbon, a gray leaf and bird, and or flying creature, and then a gray leaf and a human or frog. I imagine human. I don't know how you would describe this at all. This almost certainly is the lowest tier, where this is almost certainly the highest tier. And some that look similar but are actually different months. So I would imagine this and this are actually the same month, but this and this aren't. Or maybe these are completely different cards from different months. Your turn doesn't simply end after you place a card down in the center. You can also draw from the draw pile and place it face up on the center. If the card you drew has a matched card in the center of, you can collect both cards. That moved a little too fast for me. And so far we haven't taken any points away from the opponent. But if there's no match, it gets added to the cards in the center. If there are 2 matching cards in the center, you need to select 1 card to collect. I figured that out. However, if there are 3 matching cards in the same month, you get to collect all 4. This brings your turn to an end. Now it's your opponent's turn in the first round. So we got a plain version, and when your opponent's turn is over, it's your turn. Check to see if you have any cards in your hand that match the cards in the center. Take note that there's actually very little, very few cards in the center now. So there's a plain tier, there's a ribbon tier, there's a seed tier, and there's a light tier. Unfortunately, it looks like none of your cards match. Even so, you still have to select one of your cards to place it in the center. Go ahead and select the October card called Maple Plain, showing only maple leaves, and place it down in the center. Is that this one? Yeah, that would be my guess. This card has been added to the center. Next, draw a card from the draw pile just like before. Now the difference here. Way to go, you were lucky and drew a card that matches the one you just placed in the center, so you get to collect them. In this way, even if you don't start with a match, you can still make a match with cards you draw from the draw pile. Moreover, as a strategy, if you have two cards of the same month in your hand, you can also place one down this turn and place the other one down the next turn to match them and add them to your point pile. However, it's a risk because your opponent may get lucky and draw a match from the draw pile or pick up the card before your next turn. Okay, now your turn's over and it's your opponent's turn. They're not letting me say Koikoi. What's interesting here is there's seemingly two copies of the same card, which I didn't think that was the way this was going to play. I thought there would only be one of each tier of one of each month. Let's see. So I'm a little confused. I was wondering if it probably would make the game a little bit more interesting if you played with 2 decks or 3 decks or 4 decks even, but it would just also make the game longer. And by keeping it each round fairly short and then playing for 6 to 12 rounds, you balance out the game a little bit better, whereas it could go really crazy. Plus then if there are 2 copies of the same card, which it oddly seems like there might be, then the confusion happens as far as what if there are 2 of the exact same tier. I guess it wouldn't really matter, you'd still just score it the same. Now let me explain about calling stop. Apparently the game will just automatically have you call Koikoi. If you have at least one Yaku, when your turn is over you can call stop to win the round. That is after the first round if you're the dealer. There are many types of Yaku, so press the Yaku list to view details for each type. So there's several bits of help here, which is great. Koikoi includes all these types of Yaku. Some Yakus are relatively easy to get, while others are more difficult. Remembering the different types of Yaku will give you a distinct advantage, so it's best to memorize them. Well, that's me out. Trying to memorize anything is almost impossible. Okay, based on the cards you've got in your point pile, let's try and go for the Boar, Deer, Butterfly Yaku, which is Ino Shika Cho, which almost certainly is Boar, Deer, and Butterfly. So the months, to get the month matches, you match the flowers, but to get the Yakus, you have to match the animals, humans being included in that as an animal. And so here we have the Goku Light 5 match for 10 points. Here we have collect 4 light cards, which we don't have any light cards, excluding Willow and Ono no Michikaze cannot be combined with the light 3. And that's the light 4. So it's light 5, light 4. Then we have the rain light 4. Collect the Willow Ono Makazi and 3 light cards. Then here we have the light 3. Collect 3 light cards, excluding Willow Ono no Michikaze. And then we have the boar deer butterfly, Ino Shiko Cho, which, yes, this was a picture of a boar. This is a deer, and this is a butterfly. Which we have the deer and the butterfly, so we just need to get the boar for 5 points. And that explains why we haven't taken any points away from the opponent so far. There is also, for 1/3 of a point, the moon and cup, or the Tsukimi Yazaki. Collect Suki and Moon, and Chrysanthemum and Sake Cup, called Koikoi, makes it 3 points. And then there's also the, man, I can't even read that. What does that say? Hamazaki, Cherry Blossom, and Cup. Collect Cherry Blossom, which would be Sakura, and Curtain, and Chrysanthemum and Sake Cup. How am I stumbling over the English word more than the Japanese words? Calling Koikoi makes that 3 points, otherwise it's 1/3 a point. And then here we have Tane, is that how that word? I'm looking at this on the TV from 10 feet away, so a lot of text is kind of hard to read. Although this text is particularly hard to read with this background, where plain ribbons and seed over here is fairly easy. Collect 5 or more seed cards, 1 additional point for each over 5. And then we have Akai Aru Gazane, I think is what that says. Red and blue ribbons. Collect the red and blue ribbons. Also effective when combined with ribbon Yaku. That's 10 points. Wow, that's seemingly we're only halfway through these matches. Man, this is where Koikoi and falls apart, is the scoring system. Is that you're going to have to be fairly ignorant of this until you play about 100 games and get used to it. So really you would need someone who knew how to play the game and was interested in teaching you how to play the game to really get into this. But you certainly could play the occasional game, and that is the state I am in with a lot of games. Like I can play Mahjong, but I couldn't really tell you every single phrase and every single strategy in playing 4-player Mahjong. And I can play cribbage, but I certainly couldn't tell you how to score in cribbage perfectly and do it right, which is very dangerous in cribbage because there is a thing called muggings, where if you misscore your hand, the opponent can call you out on it and steal your points. See, we have Akaitan, red ribbon. Collect 3 red ribbon cards. Pine and red ribbon, plum and red ribbon, and cherry blossom and red ribbon. Let's see. Aoten is blue ribbons. Collect the 3 blue ribbons for 5 points. And then we have Tan, which is collect 5 or more ribbons, 1 additional point for each over 5. So that's a very low scoring thing, but not as bad as Kazu, which is collect 10 playing cards and then 1 additional for each one over 10. Man, you're gonna have to play really long to have 10 playing cards. The Chrysanthemum and Sake Cup is a special cup card and can be counted as either a seed or a playing card. Now remember, if you run out of cards out of the draw pile, it just stalemates. So you would want to kind of keep an eye on that too when trying to go for something like Kaisu. And then here's the final thing, is Koikoi. Added when a player calls out Koikoi after forming a Yaku, can be acquired by the number of times that the Koikoi statement points will change. Koikoi 1 time is 1 additional point. Koikoi 2 times is 2 additional points. Koikoi 3 times is 3 points. Koikoi 4 times is multiplied by 2. Koikoi 5 times the points are multiplied by 3. Koikoi 6 times the points are multiplied by 4. And 7 times the points are multiplied by 5. So it's a bit of a change there. Also, I'd also like to... We're in tutorial mode, so we can't just click on what we want to. In your hand, you have a July card with a picture of a clover and borer. It's called Clover and Borer. These are the cards of the same month in the draw pile, so select the clover and borer from your hand and start matching. So July is these little flowers, which I guess are clovers. And I didn't realize I was going to be learning flowers names from this. And you get a little animation. Your turn is over and you formed boar, deer, butterfly. When you form a Yaku, you can either call stop or aim for more Yaku or more points with existing Yaku by selecting continue. Continue the game in this way by calling Koikoi. When you call Koikoi, the game continues. Let's select Koikoi. And the music changed in the background. Alright, so when I matched there, I didn't draw a card. So, in the past, when we matched, I think we did draw a card. And when we couldn't match a card from our hand, we then put one down and then we drew a card. So if you score, you lose the drawing, I think. When you select it, your turn ends and your opponent's turn begins. Although calling Koikoi gives you a chance to form more Yaku, there's also a danger that your opponent will call stop first. Which, yeah, I guess your opponent at this point could say, well, we're going to just limit your scoring and end the game because I'm not doing that well. Therefore, you need to keep an eye on the cards that your opponent is collecting and make certain they're not about to call stop with a high scoring Yaku. Which, that's quite a strategy. That definitely complicates things. Also remember that when you call Koikoi, you cannot end the round into the round until you formed a new Yaku. Which means I'm leaving him to score and outplay me if I start going on a losing streak. Your opponent wasn't able to form a Yaku. Now it's your turn again. By collecting 3 blue ribbon cards, you'll be able to form the Yaku called Blue Ribbon. 2 of the cards in the point pile and 1 card in your hand. So match the card in your hand with the same month card in the center and take it. So here's a blue ribbon. And here we have a same month card, but not that. But we already have the other blue ribbons. Yep. So we got AO Tan, which AO I guess means blue. Congratulations, you've completed 2 Yaku, boar, deer, butterfly, and blue ribbon. If you call Koikoi again, at this point you'll get a point. In this way, even if you form a Yaku, you can continue the game until there are no cards left in your hand by repeating and calling Koikoi. You still have cards in your hand, so you could call Koikoi if you like, but let's call stop instead. It does seem like you want to be fairly conservative and careful in a game like this and not just try to always run out of cards, because you really are quickly lowering your odds of making matches as you get fewer and fewer cards. So we call stop. If you don't call Koikoi, round ends. The player who calls stop is the winner. Moreover, if neither side can form a Yaku even by putting out all the cards in their hand, the Oya is the winner. Interesting. If neither side can form a Yaku even by putting out all of their cards in their hand, the dealer is the winner. So I guess if you just had a 0 scoring game and you played out all your cards, then and your opponent didn't score at all, then the dealer wins. Again, that dealer advantage that casinos often have. And now we got a ton of Japanese on the screen. But I think these are probably just Yaku that we didn't get. The player who calls stop receives points from his Yaku from the opposing player. At that point, even if the opposing player has formed Yaku, they lose and must give points to the player. They do not receive any points at all. So Meg, which that's still the most messed up part about this so far, is just calling her Meg. Her real name is probably Megumi. That would be a very Japanese name. And it would be fairly easy to just call her Meg parentheses Megumi. And that would be fine. You really didn't need to localize a proper noun at all. At this point, even if the opposing player is formed Yaku, they lose and they don't receive any points at all. We already read that. When all appropriate points have been exchanged, the next round begins. The Oya is the winner side that received points of the previous round. And see, I am now up to 41, and Meg is down to 19. The Oya goes first by placing a card from their hand in the center, and so has the advantage of forming Yaku. If it appears to you as the Oya will not be able to form a Yaku worth more points than your opponent, it would be wise to form a lower point Yaku and then call stop so you can continue as Oya in the next round. In this way, the game plays out round by round, both sides taking points from each other. But that does create a weird situation where you form a low Yaku and then you have to shuffle the cards again, and I'm not sure people would really appreciate that, just so that you can stay as the dealer. But that probably is the right strategy. The final winner is the player with the most points at the end of all rounds, which 6 rounds seems like more than enough. 12, it seems really long. However, even before all the rounds are completed, if the player takes away all the points from the other player, then that player becomes the winner. I could see playing a 4-player version of this game fairly easily too. Great job. There's probably still a lot you don't know, but I think you get the feel of it by playing a few actual matches. If there's anything you don't understand, you can view the card list, the Yaku list, and the help section. They should be a big help to you. I hope that after playing for a while, you'll really start to appreciate the depth of strategy in Koikoi. Koikoi is often played by local rules and the Yaku and their point values, as well as a method of determining the winner may be different from location to location. Yeah, I imagine in the Yakuza casinos back when that was happening. Let's be honest here, most of the gambling that happens in Japan now is the pachinko parlors, done just outright in the full light of day, not people going into seedy back alleys and gambling in shady warehouses or anything like that. If you're interested in Koikoi, check out some of the local rules as well. Well, it's been fun doing this tutorial with you. See you around. Okay, and that just brings you back to the main game. So, let's see. Options, now that we understand some things. Nothing new there. We have a theme button. where apparently we can change the backgrounds, and for any card game that's fine. Seems like you have to unlock some. One would hope this isn't paid DLC. I imagine it isn't. Seems like there's several background songs. 6 oddly locked. And I wonder if that's maybe a copyright issue. Music, there's basically no fair use in Japan. So music and copyright music for Japanese centric or made in Japan products is always weird. Then you have some card backs, which they're calling Fuda designs. We have Meg here, Fumi, Kana, Mina, Sho, Mei, Umi, Kojiro, Musashi, and Izuna. So you have several anime girls that you can pick as potential competitors. That's not too bad as customization either. So yeah, we can screw around with that. We have a gallery, which apparently you beat people and you get postcards, or you're just randomly given postcards from different areas in Japan. You have the Hokkaido area, the Okinawa area, the Kansai area, the Kanto area. Yeah, I recognize most of these areas, although the Tohoku area, Chibu I recognize, the Chugoku area, the Shikoku area, and the Kyushu area I don't recognize. So I recognize about half of those sections of Japan. Japan being a fairly small island, not surprising. And then a collection of woodblock prints from the 53 stations of Tokaido, which apparently this is collectibles of woodblock prints, which would be stamps, basically canceling your ticket when riding on a train, or perhaps they are stamps that you would get in a stamp book on like a walking train. I'm not sure. Ukiyo-e. Can't click on any of them though. So an interesting amount of collectibles, kind of achievement type ideas here to keep you playing. And here we have a score to try to keep you playing. And a game like this definitely would be built around the idea of trying to get you to play more. Apparently there's some kind of rating system, and I'm at 1500, kind of like a chess rating system. There's a multiplayer leaderboard, so you can actually play multiplayer. Interesting. So I guess you would probably just get your butt handed to you playing multiplayer against probably mostly Japanese people. So yeah, this really has everything you would want to have as far as a Hanafuda game. Now, how many games am I going to play of this? It is the question. We've gone an hour trying to learn it. I think we've mostly learned it. The only thing that I think is kind of oddly missing here is there doesn't seem like there's a way to jump into looking at the screen that shows you the cards or the Yaku when you're not playing. And it would be fairly nice to be able to see the cards. There also was briefly, several decades ago, a beginnings of a standard for card design and card backs. Back in the days of Windows 95, there was kind of this standard where you could import and mod cards to have art that other people had made and uploaded to the internet. Unfortunately, that standard never really got adapted, and even today, most card games, in fact, I've not seen any card game that lets you load in your own image, where it would be fairly trivial these days to have a system like that where you just loaded up an image, it had a crop ability and a framing ability, and you could just use your own images. That being said, that really is a feature where people would just again put Playboy bunnies on it or something more explicit, and it would just confuse playing Hanafuda way more than even playing a standard Western card game like poker or solitaire. Yeah, I'm happy with what I'm seeing. I would say Koikoi Japan is probably the best Hanafuda game on Steam that I've found. If somebody knows of something better, let me know. And I would say we are going to go with this and make a little bit of a series out of this and play a few games. Probably not going to play more than 5 games though, unless we play several games in about an hour's worth, because a lot of this I imagine would be something I would just want to play off screen, or something that I would aspirationally want to play at some point in the future when I had some free time, if I ever have any free time. There is also the balance of the fact that on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday right now I'm playing Magic the Gathering Arena, which is a collectible card game, which is different from this, which is a just basic card game. That it's not a deck building game where you buy more expansions or add cards, and it's not a collectible card game where you open up packs and get more cards. It's just all the cards are included and you play. But playing 2 card games back to back is kind of challenging. Anyways, that's where I'm going to end this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below in the description box. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.